Have you ever loved someone and still felt emotionally exhausted around them? At first, everything feels amazing. They give you attention, affection, excitement. You feel deeply connected. But slowly, something changes. You begin overthinking constantly. Your mood depends on their behavior. One small message can make you happy or completely ruin your day. You feel confused all the time. One moment they make you feel special. The next moment they make you feel invisible. And somehow, even when the relationship hurts you, you still cannot let go. Why? Why do toxic relationships feel so addictive? Why do people stay attached to someone who keeps hurting them emotionally? And why does the brain sometimes mistake emotional pain for love? In this video, you are going to discover the real science behind toxic relationships, how your brain gets emotionally trapped, why toxic people become addictive, and what secretly happens inside your mind when a relationship slowly turns emotionally unhealthy. And stay until the end, because the final psychological reason is the one that keeps most people trapped for years without realizing it. Let's begin. At the beginning of most toxic relationships, nothing feels toxic. In fact, it often feels intense, exciting, almost perfect. This is because your brain releases powerful chemicals during emotional connection. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. These chemicals create pleasure, bonding, and emotional attachment. And when someone gives you attention, affection, validation, or excitement, your brain rewards you. You feel emotionally high. But here is where things become dangerous. Toxic relationships often create something called emotional inconsistency. One day they are loving, the next day they become cold. One moment they give attention, the next moment they pull away. And strangely, this inconsistency makes attachment even stronger. Why? Because the brain becomes addicted to unpredictability. This works similarly to gambling. Think about slot machines. People become addicted not because they win every time, but because they win unpredictably. Your brain keeps chasing the next reward. Toxic relationships trigger the same system. When affection becomes inconsistent, your brain starts craving emotional validation even more intensely. You become emotionally hooked. Now suddenly, your happiness depends on small signs of attention, a message, a compliment, a moment of affection. And when those things disappear, your brain panics. This creates emotional dependency. Now, let's talk about something most people never realize. Toxic relationships often activate survival instincts inside the brain, especially if someone has experienced emotional neglect, rejection, or inconsistent love earlier in life. The brain begins associating emotional instability with attachment itself. So chaos starts feeling familiar. And familiar feelings often feel strangely comfortable, even when they hurt. This is why some people leave healthy relationships because they feel boring. Healthy love feels calm, stable, safe. But toxic love feels emotionally intense, and the brain can mistake intensity for passion. Now, here comes one of the biggest psychological traps: overthinking. Toxic relationships force the brain into constant emotional analysis. What do they mean by that? Why are they acting different? Did I do something wrong? Are they losing feelings? Your mind never relaxes. Because your brain is always trying to predict emotional danger, this keeps your nervous system stuck in anxiety mode. And over time, emotional exhaustion begins. But here is the scary part. The longer this cycle continues, the more normal it starts feeling. Now let's talk about dopamine. This is one of the biggest reasons toxic relationships feel addictive. Dopamine is the brain chemical connected to reward and anticipation. But dopamine becomes strongest when rewards are uncertain. That means unpredictable affection creates stronger emotional cravings than constant affection. Think about it. When someone treats you well all the time, your brain feels calm. But when someone treats you well inconsistently, your brain becomes obsessed with getting that emotional reward again. This creates emotional addiction. You start chasing moments of validation instead of real peace. Now, here is another hidden reason toxic relationships become powerful. They slowly affect self-worth. At first, you feel confident, but constant emotional confusion slowly changes the way you see yourself. You begin questioning your value, your appearance, your personality, your worth. And when self-worth becomes weaker, you start needing validation from the same person hurting you. This creates emotional dependence. Now the relationship no longer feels like a choice. It feels like survival. And this is why leaving toxic relationships can feel incredibly painful. Even when someone knows the relationship is unhealthy, their brain still craves the emotional attachment, because emotional addiction is real. Now, here is something even deeper. Toxic relationships often isolate people emotionally. You stop focusing on yourself. Your hobbies disappear. Your peace disappears. Your emotional energy becomes fully focused on the relationship. And slowly, your entire identity starts revolving around another person's behavior. That is dangerous, because the relationship begins controlling your emotional state completely. One text can change your mood. One argument can destroy your entire day. That is not emotional balance. That is emotional dependency. Now, here is something important. Not every painful relationship is toxic. Every relationship has conflict sometimes. The difference is consistency. Healthy relationships create emotional safety. Toxic relationships create emotional confusion. Healthy love brings peace. Toxic love creates emotional instability. And your nervous system always feels the difference. Now, let's talk about the biggest reason people stay trapped: fear of loneliness. This is powerful. Many people stay in unhealthy relationships because they fear being alone more than being emotionally hurt. The brain interprets loneliness as danger, so even painful attachment can feel safer than emotional separation. This is why people return to toxic relationships repeatedly, not because they enjoy pain, but because the brain fears disconnection. And toxic relationships often create emotional highs and lows so intense that normal life feels emotionally empty afterward. This is similar to addiction withdrawal. Your brain keeps craving the emotional intensity again, even when it hurts you. Now here comes the most important realization of all. Real love should not constantly feel like survival. You should not have to beg for consistency, beg for respect, beg for emotional safety. Healthy relationships do not destroy your peace constantly. They protect it. And once you understand the psychology behind toxic relationships, you stop blaming yourself so much. You realize your brain became emotionally conditioned, not weak. Conditioned. And conditioning can change. Healing begins when you reconnect with yourself again, your confidence, your boundaries, your identity outside the relationship. Because the moment you stop chasing emotional chaos, your mind slowly becomes calmer, clearer, healthier. Now, here is the truth most people learn too late. Love alone is not enough. Someone can love you and still hurt you emotionally. Someone can care about you and still create unhealthy patterns. That is why emotional health matters more than emotional intensity, because peace is not boring. Peace is healthy. And once your brain finally experiences stable love, you realize something shocking. You no longer feel addicted to uncertainty. You no longer overthink constantly. You no longer feel emotionally exhausted every day. You finally feel safe. And safety changes everything. So if you have ever struggled to let go of a toxic relationship, remember this. Your brain was responding to emotional conditioning, dopamine, fear, and attachment patterns, not weakness. And now that you understand the science behind it, you can finally begin breaking free from it. One boundary, one realization, one healing step at a time.